Hello and welcome to the Liberia TV network. Today we are here with one of those youth icons, youth representative, one of those youthful person there who understands the dynamics and other youth-related activities within Liberia. So he will better introduce himself to us. We are currently here at his office. So, hello and welcome to the Liberia TV network, sir.
Thank you. My name is Neon. Neon Seswa is my name, and I'm honored to be with the network. I'm sure it's my first interview with the network. So it's a pleasure being here. Greetings to all of our followers from far and near. I want to say a pleasant, happy new year. Since this is my very first media engagement in 2024, a very pleasant, happy new year to all of you and to the staff of the network as well.
All right, thank you, sir. You've been one of those experienced youth icons within Liberia, and you have had numerous of opportunities to travel out of this country. You have interacted with dignitaries, and you have also been one of the key observers with regards to Liberia election. And currently, you also partially represent the young people on the transitional team. How do you look at the recent election that was actually here within Liberia?
I think the election was another moment for us to exercise our democratic right and to also be able to either send a message to the world that our democracy is improving, getting stronger by the day, or and with all of the efforts, it hasn't gone anywhere and needed much more attention. So I think those were the essence, and the Constitution, Article 1 makes it very clear that we formed the government as a people, we can alter it, we can make it. So every 6 years we have an opportunity to do that, and that's exactly what the Liberian people had the opportunity to do. So I think it was a wonderful process.
So, if you are to recommend to national government in terms of future elections to be held, with regards to some lapses or challenges that you actually saw of recent, what could be some of your recommendations?
But for me, I think that we we need to provide more civic education as a student leader and someone that is involved in the educational space of our country. I, for one, think that it is very important for us to focus on the civic education of our people and the populace, because I know for one, the National Elections Commission even attested to that at certain point or at some point of their updates, that although they did some civic engagement, but they did more of voters education. And the civic portion of our educational space is the why people should vote, is why is it important. During the process, I realized interacted with a couple of people who, for multiple reasons, went to get the voter registration card. Not necessarily that they wanted to vote or they wanted to exercise that right, but some wanted it because they needed to access the bank. Some wanted it because they will use it for travel or it will be a national identification. So the civic portion about that is for me a priority, and I think either it is the NEC or the government needs to put more focus in civic education, not in the electoral year, but years before the electoral process, to be able to make them come to an understanding on why they should vote, what is the importance of this vote, why even if you choose not to vote, what are the effects that has on you, on your future, and on the generation that you are called to serve. So it's very important for us to prioritize that, and that is what I will emphasize in this conversation for now.
Now we are done with the electoral process, and currently we having this transitional activities ongoing. and you've been one of those youth icons representing young people at the transitional processes. What are some of the functions of the transitional team, and what are those things that you think, if you have any challenges or you have any prospect features to come, what are those things that you could recommend to national government or would-be governments to come to power?
So, um, before I go into maybe my experience so far, I want to make a very um, clear disclaimer that I do not speak on behalf of the transition, neither do I speak on behalf of the cluster that I'm on. I just speak as a young person
Yeah, so can you
and will
provide
just
your
address
experience?
and will just address whatever concern you have
So,
as a young person who have
so
participated in this
that's why I
process
say you've been one of the
over the
youth
time.
icons and
And
with the level of
the
experience.
the reason that disclaimer is very important is because each of these bodies and institutions established have official spokespersons who communicate official positions of these
Certainly,
institutions.
certainly.
So now coming to generally what the entire process has been, I think the process um, has been as normal as I would say it to be in terms of the Liberia post-war transitional process. And I say normal because we have had this transition twice. This is the second. The very first happened in over 70 years post-war Liberia, when we had President Weah transitioning as the new president to take over from President Eddie Johnson Sirleaf. And that transition saw similar happening of what is currently happening now. By the way, the precedent we use right now is what happened with the President Sirleaf administration when she issued an executive order to set up the joint presidential transitional team that led the process up to the time the leadership took over and it presented the report they would have collected within the time frame. That is exactly what's happening right now. The team being set up by President Weah and that of inclusive of the president-elect is just intended to collect enough data as much as possible, because as you may be aware, before any administration, whether it be in the private sector where a lot of us are, you will want to have an understanding of what you are taking over from and in a particular office space, and how do you improve on the successes that are happening or the failures that took place, how do you correct them moving forward so that you cannot repeat quote unquote errors that were being made in the outgoing administration. And that is why that is very significant to whatever a transitional process is. And I think this process is also not separate from that objective. It is also very important for us to note that on January 22nd, on the date of the inauguration, as per the Constitution, you realize that 1 week after that inauguration, the president inaugurated will be addressing the nation on the state of affairs of the country and also putting forth his agenda for the country moving forward. The state affairs of the country, we have to include what the preceding government completed or did before projecting what the agenda of the country is. So the transition process is meant to collect sufficient as many information as possible so that that process can be more informed, and so that the president-elect can be able, or the inaugurated president can be able to communicate his plan and provide update on the successes that the outgoing administration was able to accomplish.
So, in order to stop some future embarrassment or future lapses, what we actually love to recommend to national government, just in case.
I think with my experience with this process, I think it is going to be technically impossible to work within the period of 9 days or less than 10 days to gather all of the information. Everything that happened between November and up to the December 27 was just all about putting paperwork together and the president issuing an executive order. What happened is that the official access given to clusters to actually function was just in a period of 10 days or less than 10 days to be able to meet the different agencies or ministry they are with, collect information and be able. So I think that for me particularly, I think that is just short of a time to be able to collect all and more technical information required possible of all of the agencies required and be able to compile them as a joint team and be able to submit it for the adequate work to go. Additionally, I also think that it is a very important thing for us to realize that our country right now do not need to be depending on an executive declaration before a transition can start. I think we might have it smoothly going for President Eddie Johnson Sirleaf and then transitioning to President Weah, and now smoothly going for President Weah transitioning to President-elect Bokai. But we make laws, or laws are made for the future. Have we come to think about what happened in an event where the president chooses not to issue an executive order? What laws or what principle do we have that still supports or projects a transition in the absence of a presidential declaration, like happened in the case of President Sirleaf and happened in the case of President Weah? I stand to be corrected, but I do not know of any presidential declaration that happened, for example, in one of the countries that we look up to greatly, the United States, that has to happen before the transition takes place. What I do know is that immediately an electoral body declares the next president, immediately there are institutions or bodies who are responsible for transition, and the transition immediately takes effect and start to go on. In our case, you have to wait for the presidential declaration, and then the team is set up, the other people, the other incoming leader add his own member there, and then they have to work and start to craft on what the plan is going to be like for the transition, and they start to move forward. I think those processes delayed the entire transition and the essence of the transition in terms of collecting the vital information that is required. So what my thought would be, for example, I know somebody could argue that it is a constitutional provision, but again, in terms of constitutional debate, it is another conversation all by itself, because there's going to come a time where we need to start looking at even some provision of our constitution that still needs to be looked at, that still needs to be reviewed, that still needs to be considered in terms of what it meets our current reality as a people. For example, I was saying to some of you the last time that in an event where you have the legislature who is being paid monthly for the job that they do at your legislature, the Constitution provides that if the legislature is recalled by the executive, the chief executive of the country, the president, it means that the government must shoulder the responsibility to pay half of their salary. Okay, in an instant, it means that if you were paid for December, 100% you were paid for December, although you are on break, but we still give you your full salary. Now, if there is an emergency and you are recalled to attend to that emergency, even if you work for 4 days or 5 days or 1 day, you are under the government is under obligation by the Constitution to be able to pay you half of your salary in an effect that we have already paid you your full salary for that particular month that is in question. So for me, these are some instances or cases that I think we still need to look at constitutional reform and look at different aspects of our constitution to learn. So for me, as a young person, I can propose strongly that we need an act of transition, an act of national legislature that will put a transition structure in place that do not need a presidential proclamation or declaration for it to take effect. That the policy is going to be there, that this is the step-by-step approaches for transition beginning day one of the announcement of the official result. A should happen, this should happen, that should happen, and the different institutions.
You are speaking like a lawyer.
I am not a lawyer. I don't intend
But,
to. I'm not one. I'm a student. I love the law, right? I love the law, but I'm not a lawyer. I read a lot about these things. I one of the person I try to go after understanding the different intent about these different scope. Also, I have a little background with that because I My first degree actually in criminal justice.
So
and in criminal justice we do criminal law, so I do or constitutional law.
So with
we
this,
have some little idea, but I'm not a